Coming up, the Cowboys, Chiefs, Lions, and Bills look to clinch their spot in the playoffs. This is Locked On Game to Game NFL.
Every game, every team, every angle. Locked On Game to Game, your team every day.
Welcome in. You're watching Locked On Game to Game NFL, local experts taking you through previews of all of the games of Week 15 of the NFL season. I am your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you so much for making Locked On your first listen every single weekday. Jalen Hurts is going to continue that MVP campaign as Philly goes to Chicago to take on the Bears. Locked On Eagles has more on what they can take away from this week's matchup in Chicago.
The Philadelphia Eagles need to keep Justin Fields inside the pocket on Sunday to get a win against the Chicago Bears. I'm Louis DiBiase, host of the Locked On Eagles podcast. When you go position by position, it's not a contest. The Eagles outmatch Chicago in pretty much every way. They have surrounded Jalen Hurts with so much star talent. Justin Fields doesn't really have that same situation with the Bears, but he has been able to elevate that offense at times this year with his scrambling ability. Over 900 rushing yards and 8 touchdowns on the year. Broke the single game record for most rushing yards by a quarterback earlier this year. The Eagles pass rush needs to stay hot. They need to keep Justin Fields inside the pocket and force him to use his underwhelming weapons on Sunday at Soldier Field. I'm Louis DiBiase, host of the Locked On Eagles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Bitter rivals Cleveland and Baltimore will play on Saturday in Week 15. Locked On Browns hoping Cleveland can continue to improve on offense.
This is Jeff Lloyd, host of the Locked On Browns podcast, with your Browns' biggest keys headed into this week's Saturday game against the Baltimore Ravens. With the return of Deshaun Watson, has seen an uptick in the passing game. Big improvement from Deshaun Watson from his first start to his second start, putting up 275 yards against the Cincinnati Bengals. But this week is all going to be about one thing: running the football. The Ravens run the ball well, and the Ravens defend the ball, running the ball well. The Browns, right now, the running game has kind of lagged a little bit over the last couple of weeks, and we know they've had their issues this season stopping teams from running the ball against them. The Browns have been better in recent weeks in defending the run, and as they have, their ability to run the ball has slowed down some. So the biggest key will be whether or not the Browns can have a dual threat on offense, running the ball, throwing the ball, and can they do enough to put Tyler Huntley in position to have to beat the Cleveland Browns with his arm? Jeff Lloyd, Locked On Browns, available wherever you get your podcasts.
Indy also taking to the field on Saturday as they head up to Minnesota. Locked On Colts is hoping that Jeff Saturday will completely flip the script this weekend.
The Indianapolis Colts have got to show that they're capable of growth on offense this weekend against the Minnesota Vikings. This is Jake Arthur from the Locked On Colts podcast. This offense, as we've all seen, they've become very predictable. Defenses know what's coming. It seems like it's always run, pass. And yes, you have Jonathan Taylor, one of the best running backs in the league, and you should use him, but you don't run him into the ground. You don't need to solely lean on that. This Vikings defense is prime for the picking if they want to. They're dead last in overall defense, dead last against the pass. They're middle of the road against the run, red zone, and on third down. So they're vulnerable. The Colts do have guys like Michael Pittman Jr. and Paris Campbell that basically turn into running backs with the balls in their hands, so you can lean on that. Shoot, you can get Jelani Woods involved in a feature role. That would be great. For more on the Indianapolis Colts and this matchup, follow along with Locked On Colts. We're available Monday through Friday wherever you get your podcasts. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Coming up, the Chiefs are going to try to clinch the AFC West in Houston. This is Locked On Game to Game NFL. Today's edition of Locked On Game to Game is brought to you by Total Wine & More. This holiday at Total Wine & More, you will find a new favorite Cabernet or Chardonnay or the perfect gift for everyone on your list. You'll know you found something special, all for the lowest price. Love what you find only at Total Wine & More. Drink responsibly. Be 21. Welcome in. You're listening to Locked On Game to Game NFL. I'm your host, Kainani Stevens. Thank you for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. Pittsburgh has not declared their quarterback as of yet, so Locked On Steelers is putting the attention, at least this week, on the defense. Locked On Panthers happy to stick to more of the same.
The Carolina Panthers need to stick to the formula if they're going to continue their winning ways and beat the Pittsburgh Steelers on Sunday. Hi, I'm Julian Council, host of the Locked On Panthers podcast. Now you're asking me, Julian, what's the formula? Well, it's simple. The Carolina Panthers need to continue to run the football if they're going to win on Sunday against Pittsburgh. Since interim head coach here in Carolina, Steve Wilks, took over, the Carolina Panthers are averaging 146.8 yards per ground on the game. And in their 4 wins, the Panthers are averaging 203.2 yards on the ground. That's what they do. They run the football. That's how they win. They play tough defense. They run the ball, and they ask quarterback Sam Darnold to not make any mistakes. And through his first 2 starts here this season in 2022, Darnold has done that. So as long as the Panthers stick to the formula, they should avoid what I think might be a trap game against a Pittsburgh Steelers team that's also 5-8, but has little to play for as they're likely out of the AFC playoff picture heading into Week 15. For more on your Carolina Panthers in this weekend's big matchup, be sure to check out the Locked On Panthers podcast every Monday through Friday, free and available wherever you get your podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Can the Pittsburgh Steelers run defense show up? That's going to be the big question when they take on the Carolina Panthers. I'm Chris Carter of the Locked On Steelers podcast. That's going to be a big question because the Panthers love to run their Arby's package where they bring in extra tight ends, extra offensive linemen, and they give the ball to their running backs to try to run teams over and take over games late. The Panthers have won 3 out of their last 4 with that running game. Chuba Hubbard had 99 yards overall last week, and the Steelers got pulverized by the Ravens offensive line. If the Steelers run defense can wake up and help this game, that's going to be the biggest key. You got offensive linemen like Ike Mekwonu that's been really good for the Panthers, but the Steelers defensive line has taken some hits. You got Chris Wormley getting hurt, but Jonathan Marshall signed off the Jets practice squad. Maybe he helps with the depth that the Steelers have been looking at. Ultimately, this is going to come down to can TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Alex Highsmith, Larry Ogunjobi, those guys stuff the line of scrimmage, let Miles Jack, Devin Bush, Robert Spillane, maybe even some safety help come up and stuff the Panthers run game. The Panthers rank currently 13th in overall yards, 14th in yards per attempt in rush. If the Steelers stuff the run of the Panthers, force Sam Darnold to beat them and force the Panthers to play from behind, that's their biggest key to victory. If this game is really close down to the wire and the Panthers are able to run the ball in the 4th quarter, this is going to be another disappointing loss and guarantee that the Steelers have a losing record this season. We'll see and find out more how that's going to play out with our crossover Thursday episode. But if you want all the breakdowns, go to Locked On Steelers. I'm your host, Chris Carter. We'll see you there.
The Chiefs are heavy favorites as they head to Houston looking to lock up the AFC West. Locked On Chiefs and Locked On Texans are in for a preview of that matchup.
Kansas City Chiefs play the Houston Texans, and their key to victory this week is to start fast. This team absolutely needs to start faster than it has started against the past couple of teams, especially the Denver Broncos. 2 field goals in the first couple of drives. That is not going to be acceptable. Obviously, they can win this game without scoring touchdowns on every drive against the Texans, but they need to get to a point where this offense starts fast. Patrick Mahomes has to figure out how to get scoring early and often against teams, especially like the Houston Texans, who will struggle against this Chiefs offense and could possibly struggle against their defense. Texans are going to be missing several different players that could make huge impacts in this game. Brandon Cooks isn't going to be playing. Dameon Pierce is out. They have quarterback issues to watch. But the key for this Chiefs team is that they start fast. For more on this game and the Kansas City Chiefs, check out the Locked On Chiefs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Can the Houston Texans do the unthinkable and pull off a very unlikely upset against the Kansas City Chiefs? I'm Cody Davis of the Locked On Texans podcast, and the biggest key to victory for the Houston Texans is just stay consistent. On Sunday, the Houston Texans had an opportunity to pull off another unlikely upset against the Dallas Cowboys. They went into that game as a 17.5-point underdog and almost came away victorious. They looked good on the offensive side of the ball, and they looked damn good on the defensive side of the ball. And in order for them to replicate that same performance against another NFL powerhouse, consistency is the key.
It's finally Desmond Ridder time for Atlanta. Locked On Falcons details what we can expect from the rookie QB and his team if they want to beat the Saints.
Protecting Desmond Ridder is the key to victory for the Falcons in Week 15. I'm Aaron Freeman, host of Locked On Falcons. With Falcons rookie quarterback Desmond Ridder making his NFL debut this weekend against the Saints, the Falcons need to do their utmost to protect him. things have been looking up for the Falcons' pass protection in recent weeks, with recently benched quarterback Marcus Mariota being the fourth least pressured quarterback in the NFL since Week 10, according to PFF. That needs to continue in Week 15, and we know that the Falcons can run the ball effectively, and if they want to have a little bit more of a balanced offense, thanks to an improved pass attack under Ritter, it all starts up front. If Ritter has time, he should be able to cook. For more coverage of this Week 15 matchup, follow Locked On Falcons, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Jags will host the Cowboys this week. Locked On Cowboys focused in on Trevor Lawrence, while Locked On Jags wants to see Jacksonville keep Dallas's defensive star in check.
If the Dallas Cowboys are going to beat the Jacksonville Jaguars this Sunday in Jacksonville, they are going to need to get after their quarterback. Hi, I'm Landon McCool with the Locked On Cowboys podcast, and despite getting a win last weekend against the Houston Texans, the Cowboys are still kind of licking their wounds a little bit in what many consider to be an underperformance against a team that should have been easily beatable. Part of that issue was a lack of pass rush, as the Cowboys, for the first time in a while, received no sacks recorded against the Houston Texans, two quarterbacks that they played, and they cannot afford to do that again this week against Jacksonville, because they have Trevor Lawrence, who is coming in as starting to really come into his own and ascend to the kind of quarterback that everyone anticipated he would be when he was made the number one pick in the draft. So what do the Cowboys need to do? They have got to find a way to get after Trevor Lawrence, make him feel uncomfortable. 0 sacks is not going to work against this team that has much more advanced pass catchers than the Houston Texans, who had lost their starting wide receivers before the game. The Cowboys have got to find a way to bring Trevor Lawrence to the ground, make him feel uncomfortable, because if they don't, they could see another rising star really start to take their place on a national stage against the Cowboys in a football game. For more on this, make sure you check us out at the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Stopping Pollard and Parsons is what the Jaguars have to do. I'm Tony Wiggins with the Locked On Jaguars podcast, and these are your keys to Jacksonville's victory over the Dallas Cowboys. You got to stop Tony Pollard. Can't give up the big plays on offense. You have to make sure that he doesn't put you in a bad situation by scoring quickly from a long ways away. On the other side, you got to find a way to block Michael Parsons. He's one of the top 5 players in the NFL, in my opinion. And he plays them all over the field, and he can absolutely disrupt the passing game as well as the running game like the greats used to do. And I'm talking about like Lawrence Taylor and Von Miller. I think those two players are the first 2 guys you have to stop if the Jaguars want to win this game. And, of course, Trevor Lawrence has to keep playing the way he's been playing the last 5 or 6 weeks.
The Cardinals and Broncos technically have nothing to play for at this point except pride. Locked On Cardinals goes over the ever-increasing hot seat for our coach Cliff Kingsbury, and Locked On Broncos goes over what Denver needs to do if they want to get a win.
The Arizona Cardinals need to get to whatever quarterback they're going to be facing wearing a Denver Broncos jersey on Sunday. I'm Alex Clancy with Locked On Cardinals. On the heels of Kyler Murray, his non-contact injury, out for the year and probably a part of the 2023 season, the Arizona Cardinals team is in flux. What's next? Does the rest of the season matter? Are we already looking to 2023? You are not looking to 2023 yet, because I'll tell you what. Going to Denver, playing against a Nathaniel Hackett coach team, is a perfect situation for Cliff Kingsbury to show, hey, I belong here. Because, yes, the pass rush is important for the Cardinals to get to the quarterback. Yes, the Cardinals should run the ball and get the ball out quickly from Colt McCoy. But if the Cardinals lose to the Nathaniel Hackett-led Denver Broncos, this will add even more question marks surrounding Cliff Kingsbury and his tenure as the Arizona Cardinals head coach.
The Chargers will host the Titans on Sunday. Locked On Chargers is keying in on red zone points, while Locked On Titans wants to get pressure on LA's quarterback.
If the Chargers want to take down the Titans on Sunday, they got to score when they get in the red zone. This is David Drogemeyer of the Locked On Chargers podcast, and your key for success on Sunday is to punch it in when you get those opportunities. The Chargers are 27th in the league in red zone scoring percentage with a 47.92% rate, which is not going to be good enough. They were 2 of 6 in the red zone against the Miami Dolphins, and that's just not going to cut it. You cannot beat good quality football teams without punching it in every single time you get in their red zone. Points are at a premium, especially when you're going up against the Tennessee Titans offense that likes to run the ball and control the clock. The Chargers got to take advantage of all of their opportunities. Getting Mike Williams back last week is going to help. Getting Donald Parham Jr. back this week, the tight end, is also going to help. The 6'8" monster has a giant catch radius and has very good run after catch ability. But for more on this game and for more on the Chargers, please check out the Locked On Chargers podcast, your team every day.
If the Tennessee Titans want to defeat the Los Angeles Chargers and end their 3-game losing streak, they're going to have to get pressure on Justin Herbert. My name's Tyler Rowland, host of the Locked On Titans podcast. The key to victory is simple for the Titans this week. Get back to affecting the quarterback. The Titans' pass rush has fallen off completely with the injury to Danico Autry. Luckily for the Titans, Danico Autry returned to practice this week. The Titans have to hope that he can get back on the field, help a banged-up Jeffrey Simmons and Bud Dupree finally get some pressure on the quarterback once again. And no coincidence, the Titans haven't forced a turnover on defense in 3 weeks as well. So the Titans need the pass rush so that they can hopefully force some turnovers against the Chargers, help out their offense, and slow down Justin Herbert and his weapons. Getting Danico Autry back to revive the pass rush, the key to victory for the Titans in Week 15. For more analysis, check out the Locked On Titans YouTube channel and the Locked On Titans podcast on whatever platform that you do stream. Locked On Titans, it's your team every day.
It's a must-win for the Giants after a red-hot start to the season. They have been very, very beatable lately. Locked On Giants goes over what needs to get done against the Commanders to get a win on Sunday night.
Can the New York Giants get things back on track in an absolute positive must-win game against the Washington Commanders? Well, they better if they hope to punch their ticket to the postseason tournament. Hi, everybody. I'm Patricia Traina reporting, and the New York Giants have hit a skid. They're 1-3-1 these last 5 games and just had their doors blown off by the Philadelphia Eagles in a home game at MetLife Stadium, a score of 48-22. But all is not lost for the New York Giants. Their playoff hopes are still very much in their hands. They have to simply go down to Washington, play on a Sunday night, and beat the Commanders, whom, by the way, 2 weeks ago, they tied against. If the Giants can do that, they can erase the current tiebreaker that the Commanders hold over them, which is the better record in the NFC. And the Giants would then, with a win over the Commanders, get the head-to-head tiebreaker, which is the first one when sorting out the bottom of the tiebreaker procedure. Now, the Giants have some injury issues which have hurt their roster, which have forced them to change some of the things they do as far as offense and defense goes. But the bottom line is also the Giants have had a lot of mistakes. They've had some sloppy football play, and they've done some things that just basically they shouldn't be doing this late in the season, regardless of who's playing out there. So what do the Giants need to do if they want to erase the sour taste of the last 5 weeks from everybody's mouths? Very simple. Put more time in this week. Pay close attention to the details. The roster's not going to change, all right? There might be a tweak here and there, but the cavalry's not going to come riding in to help this team, get back on track. It's the devil is in the details. And this team, whether it's watching more film, whether it's staying after practice to catch a few more balls from the jugs machine, whether it's lifting more weights or getting with the coaches to find out how to break down film even better, whatever it takes, this Giant team needs to do it because this is in their control. They can control what they do over the next several days before they head down to Landover for their game against the Commanders. They can control how they prepare. But if they don't control that, if they don't do what needs to be done, they'll go down to Washington and chances are they'll lose. And not only will they lose the game, but they will lose more control over what they had as far as their playoff chances are concerned. And that's something the Giants don't want to have happen. So Giants, bottom line, put the extra time in this week. Be prepared to put the overtime in and just get right at it. Because if you lose, no, it's not over. You could still make the playoffs, but your road just got harder. And why make things harder when you have the control right now, right here, to do something about it. For all things New York Giants, keep it here on the Locked On Giants podcast.
That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Game to Game NFL. Thank you so much for making Locked On your first listen every weekday. Make sure that you're subscribed to Locked On NFL and your favorite teams Locked On podcast on YouTube and wherever else you get your podcasts from. I'm Kanani Stevens. This has been Locked On Game to Game.